This is not just a story. It is a prophecy of the Griots, wrapped in parable. A dirge turned resurrection hymn, a mirror held to a lost world. There was once a city called Kalahari, the jewel of the Lufafa River. Her canoes kissed distant shores. Her drums spoke to the clouds, and her elders held truth like sacred calabashes. But time, greed, and forgetfulness buried Kalahari. The traders were scattered. The sacred groves burned, and from her ashes, a shadow city grew, still bearing her name, but none of her soul. It was in this new Kalahari, hollow and hungry, that children no longer sat by the fire. They danced with screens, they mimicked strangers, they laughed at wisdom and called decency old-fashioned. And so the last living flame of the old ways, Kombare of Ahigbe's bloodline, became ashamed and depressed and descended into silence. He had not spoken since Tobuama, one of the federating towns, was swallowed by fire and shame. He had watched year by year as the wind carried away memory. But when the prince of Kalahari, barely 16, stole a goat and live streamed his deed with swagger, Kombare, the last of the Griots, who speaks for forgotten cities, summoned the Council of Bones and Blood. They came reluctantly. The chiefs in flowing agbada, with harsh perfumes from strange lands. They no longer wore the oils made of sweet-smelling herbs and spices, which spoke calmness to the soul. They gathered in the ruins of the sacred courtyard, where the drums of Iduwini once sang. Now, the wind moaned through broken pillars, and the ancestors held their breath in shock. Kombare stood with his back bent like the arc of a forgotten bow, hunched like a question mark carved by time. He stood, assisted by his long staff, the symbol of his sacred office and the authority on which he had summoned the gathering.
You ask, why the children no longer bow? Why are their mouths sharp, but their spirits soft? I will tell you.
He turned to the king and his robed chiefs, their hands heavy with gold, but light with guilt.
You fed them Cinderella, a girl who left home without permission to dance with strangers until midnight. And now your daughters disappear into the night, and you call it freedom. You gave them Pinocchio, a wooden boy who did nothing but lie. You rewarded him with humanity. Now your children lie and call it survival. Hustle. You gave your children Aladdin, a street thief who found a genie and stole a kingdom and a princess. Now your sons believe riches come from shortcuts and fraud. You wonder why your sons scam and call it destiny. You made Batman a hero, a maxed loner who breaks the law at 320 kilometers an hour. You made your children adore Batman, a maxed lone man who speeds through cities at 320 kilometers per hour without consequence. We now have on our hands young adults who race on our streets drunk with delusion. Now your youth speed through towns, creating graves for themselves and others on our roads. You praise Sleeping Beauty, a girl who slept through life for 100 years and was kissed awake. She found love while sleeping. And now your daughters sleep through purpose, waiting for kisses. They sit on their hands, waiting for salvation that they could birth themselves. You romanticize Snow White. You painted her as a prize. She was a young girl who lived with 7 men in a forest. And now you wonder why innocence no longer blushes. You introduced your children to Rapunzel, who let her hair down to smuggle a lover into her father's house. Now your daughters tear down the honor of your lineage, strand by strand. And you cry as your daughters elope with shadows.
The arena was still. The wind that often roamed the city with careless arrogance now curled at the Combare's feet.
You banished the Jakpa, the tortoise, who taught cunning without cruelty. You silenced the Nancy, the spider, who spun wisdom into mischief. You buried Sunguru, the hare, Ajapa, the traveler, the leopard, who loved the moonlight drum. Now the seeds you allowed strangers to plant in your fertile soil have become forest of criminality, of lawlessness, of shamelessness.
He raised his staff and struck the ground.
These are the seeds you let strangers plant. These are the forests now choking our souls. The tree of shame now bears fruit in your ancestral compounds. And you, O parents and leaders, keepers of titles and nothing else, you did nothing. You stood watching, laughing, sponsoring strange shows, forgetting to sponsor the age-old festivals and rites of adulthood, where the young are equipped with undiluted native wisdom. You fund the decay with foreign tongues and local blindness. You choose sugar-tongued poison over bitter truth. Now the children wear borrowed masks and call them crowns.
At that moment, the king unclasped his ring of pride, dropped his staff, and bowed his head. The chiefs bowed, and from the shadows, the children stared, eyes wide, not in defiance, but recognition. The queen wept in groans, for her niece had just gone viral for teaching others how to seduce rich old men. The other leaders and moneybags shifted in shame. Other council members looked at Combare as if hearing a dirge for the first time. Then Combare knelt before the council and whispered,
"But it is not too late. The river that forgets its source may dry up, but if it returns, the ancestors will still welcome it. Bring back the moonlight stories. Bring back the evening circles under the Otala tree. Bring back the old names that still hold power."
That night, the city did not sleep. The elders remembered their stories. The parents turned off all distractions to make for family time, as in the days of old. For the first time in many years, children sat still to hear tales from their parents and grandparents by the fireside. Combare lit a new fire in the square of lost songs that night. The Griots who had left the city to live in the surrounding caves returned, wearing leopard skin, wisdom, and sky-dyed cloth. They told stories of the moon's marriage to the sea, why the tortoise's back cracked, and the drums that weep when children forget their pedigree. From that day, every child of Kalahari heard the truth echo from the fireside and the square of the lost songs, not in a foreign tongue, not in stolen tales, but in the voice of their forebears. And the last Griot standing Kombare, he did not return to silence. No, he began to teach ancient wisdom again, not just to children, but to anyone starving for the truth they had once discarded.